and welcome to the My Health series. My name is Dr. Jolanta Burke, and today we'll be discussing Sleep Through the Life Cycle, a toolkit for resting deeply at every stage of life. This series explores a wide range of topics in the area of health and well-being and brings together some of the leading experts in these fields, with a view to empower people with the knowledge to make informed decisions about their health and well-being. And we are absolutely delighted that the series has recently been announced as the winner in the Best of Europe Region Awards 2024 by CASE, which is the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. And today I am joined by three experts in the area of sleep. Dr. Maria Pertl, lecturer at the Department of Health Psychology, School of Population Health, RCSI. Maria is also a chartered health psychologist, certified lifestyle medicine practitioner, and British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, and the member of the Irish Society of Lifestyle Medicine. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you.
Professor Richard Costello, Professor of Respiratory Medicine at the Department of Medicine, RCSI, and a consultant in respiratory and health medicine in Beaumont Hospital, Dublin. You're very welcome,
Thank
Richard.
you.
Mr. Motti Verghese, sleep physiologist at the Sleep Therapy Clinic. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the RCSI MyHealth series. So let's start with you, Maria. Why do we sleep?
Thanks, Jolanta. So the function of sleep is really to rest and restore our bodies, and it's really important for maintaining both our physical and our mental health. So while we sleep, our body repairs cells, tissues, muscles that help to maintain our physical functioning. It also strengthens the immune system, so it helps to promote the production of cytokines and immune cells that protect us from infection. It helps to regulate things like our blood pressure and our heart rate and our metabolism. It's also really important for our brain health. So we know it plays a really important role for things like consolidating our memories, so forming long-term memories, and also just processing things that we're learning throughout the day. So we probably have all had the experience of, if we don't have a good night's sleep, that the next day we feel like we can't pay attention to things properly, or we have trouble focusing. So it's really important for supporting cognitive processes like that, problem solving, decision making, and likewise for our mood as well. So certainly when we don't have a good night's sleep, we tend to feel more irritable, or our mood fluctuates a bit. So, and that's because sleep plays a really important role in regulating our emotions. So there's actually very little sleep doesn't play a role in terms of our bodily systems. So it's really important for survival. I would say as important as things like sleep and as food and water, really. So it's really fundamental for that. And sleep is most restorative when our sleeping patterns are in line with the kind of natural light and day cycles and our circadian rhythms. Okay. So our circadian rhythms are our intrinsic 24-hour cycles, and they help to regulate lots of physiological processes in our bodies. And when those circadian rhythms, I suppose, are really sensitive to external cues like light. So the things that we do during the day can impact on our circadian rhythm. So it's really important that we're mindful of that as well, and we do things throughout the day to optimize our sleep. So for example, in the morning, it's really important that we're exposed to light, because that helps to reset our circadian rhythm and kind of sets us up for the day. It's the signal that it's time to get up and go. And conversely, in the evening, then we need to minimize the light we're exposed to, because that's the signal to the body to rest. So I think it's important to point out that sleep is a really natural biological process where our bodies are programmed to sleep, but there's lots of things that we can do to optimize the quality of our sleep.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And we'll talk more about those strategies later on throughout this episode. And can I just ask you, Motti, what about our brain? Let's go deeper into our brain. What happens with our brain and sleep?
Yeah, I think we can confidently say that there's not one organ system in the body that doesn't benefit from a good night's sleep. Sleep also happens in cycles, and so we may get 5 or 6 cycles of sleep each night. And each cycle of sleep consists of different stages of sleep. And each stage of sleep has its own different functions as well. So for example, stage 3 sleep, which is physically refreshing sleep, we produce a lot of growth hormones in stage 3 sleep. And there is REM sleep, the dream stage of sleep, or the rapid eye movement sleep, which is a mentally refreshing sleep. So if we woke up in the morning and felt very physically and mentally refreshed, it's an indication that we probably got enough time to spend in both the stage 3 or the non-REM deep sleep and also the REM sleep. So that's a good way to look at, see how we to understand how we slept the previous night. There are 3 factors that I thought would be interesting to talk about, which is learning, how sleep impacts our learning and memory formation and also decision making. So researchers have proven that if we have gotten enough sleep the night before the learning, we had better chances of retaining that information. Or in other words, the information that we take in usually goes into a short-term memory basket, and it's when you sleep that it gets converted to long-term memory. Now, we talked about the stage 3 sleep and the REM sleep earlier, right? The stage 3 sleep has a bigger role in processing factual information or declarative memory, or forming declarative memory, I should say. And the REM sleep has a bigger role in forming procedural memory, you know, how to perform a specific task on an Excel sheet or how to use a new software. So that's how the information is stored. So once it is converted to long-term memory, we can recall it at another point, and every time we recall it, we are reconsolidating it. And same applies for decision making. Or there are everyday decisions that we make, you know, like driving a car or something that we just do quite naturally, and they're very sensitive to sleep loss. So if you lose sleep and if you're quite sleep deprived, the chances are that our reaction time is going to be a little bit longer, and it can naturally cause problems when we are driving. And there are complex decisions, you know, and 36 hours of sleep loss is proven to cause problems with complex decisions. So is weight management. All of us may have tried to kind of maintain ideal body weight. We always talk about diet and we always talk about exercise programs, but we hardly ever mention sleep in that triad. So it is something to kind of focus on while we are trying to maintain ideal body weight as well. I think we can confidently say that sleep plays a significant role in maintaining optimal physical and mental health.
That's wonderful. So really it is really great for students who are studying.
Absolutely.
We have to know when to go to sleep. Well, first of all, to study beforehand. I remember learning that when I was a student myself, and it was really working for me. So it's interesting that you're saying it. And you know, complex decision making, I think every one of us at some stage has to be involved, has to engage in complex decision making. So it possibly is very useful for all of us. Could you tell us a little bit more about that weight management aspect?
Yeah, so there are several mechanisms by which it can happen, by which sleep influences the weight management. But there's one in particular, which is the balance or imbalance of 2 hormones called a ghrelin, called hunger hormone, and the other one is called leptin, which is also called the thinner hormone. So if you're sleep deprived, we produce more ghrelin, right, which stimulates the body to take more food. And the thinner hormone, we will not have enough of it. And the leptin makes us feel full, or it leads to satiety. So we don't feel full until we have a larger portion of food. So between that, and also if you're sleep deprived, our activity levels are going to be down, whether it is because of problem with the quantity of sleep or the quality of sleep, we are going to be tired, we're going to feel tired during the daytime. Naturally, the activity levels will be down. You know, you don't feel like going to the gym or going out for a walk, and between the two can result in weight gain.
Yeah, so it's like a vicious cycle we get stuck in.
I think so.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Motti. Richard, so what about the rest of the body?
Wow, well, there's so much happens. I mean, I love what you said about that imbalance of those hormones, because I think any of us who are tired know how you just find yourself snacking for no good reason, and it's a really important thing to think about in terms of how sleep is having these little minor knock-on effects. That every part of the body is affected. I mean, you've outlined the neurocognitive pieces around memory and mood and physical activity. There's the deeper ones that we may not feel, like blood pressure is a big feature. People get more metabolic disease like diabetes, and all of this is really embodied in things that we do in society, like shift work. That's an example of a condition where we're chronically not getting enough of the right sleep at the right time, and that leads to those types of processes. So a lot of people who have shift work manifest a lot of these particular problems. So that's one way that we see it being played out in the particular types of people that it's manifested in. But every organ is in its own way affected. But I think you've outlined some of them beautifully in terms of brain function, mood, appetite, metabolic syndrome, all of those.
Okay, well, Richard, you said something really interesting, the right sleep at the right time. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
I think there's everybody here will have something to contribute here, but I think we're all born with a particular time that it suits us to go to sleep, and indeed a certain number of hours of sleep that we need. Now, it's perceived in the literature, your mother will tell you that you need 8 hours of sleep. Not everybody needs 8 hours of sleep. Like most body processes, there's a variation. So some people don't need quite as much, and others need a bit more, but most people need in around 8 hours. But there is a wider variation between sort of 4 and 10 hours of sleep. And the time that we go to sleep is really important, and it depends on the individual. Some people, what they call a chronotype, what type of person, whether you're what's known as a lark, you go to bed early, get up early, or an owl goes to bed late and gets up late. And if you sleep the number of hours that you're supposed to sleep, but you sleep them in the wrong chronotype, then you won't feel as rested. I mean, it's a good thought experiment, Jolanta, is like, if I said to you, you're allowed 8 hours of sleep, but it's from 8 in the morning to late at night, you kind of intuitively know that wouldn't suit you. And that's how you imagine the chronotype. So if you're a lark and you go to bed late, you might get the same number of hours of sleep, but just not feel the right way. So how much sleep is individual, and at the time is individual. So they're two tips that I think that everybody really probably would benefit from knowing.
Brilliant. So you've mentioned that when people don't have the right sleep at the right time, it may cause a lot of conditions, health conditions. But what about the other way around? Are there certain conditions that make us sleep less, or maybe reduce the quality of our sleep?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, there's lots. So you'd wonder, like, why is there a doctor on a show talking about a normal process? Like, and so there are diseases that can make people sleep less well. I indicated just the normal things of life, like shift work, or a very long commute, or that sort of thing, or family circumstances that cause them to not get sleep at the right time. But in terms of disease processes that cause people to have disturbance in sleep, I think the biggest one is probably psychological issues like depression, anxiety, but also certain neurocognitive diseases like Alzheimer's and obviously psychiatric processes like psychosis. But we also have medicines that people use, so corticosteroids, for example, or stimulants can stop people from sleeping. Diseases of the thyroid, and there's lots of other processes that can cause people to not sleep well, diseases that underline a drive and bad sleep. But it's a pretty normal process to sleep. So whilst people may not sleep well, it's very hard not to sleep. So it's probably worth understanding that there's lots of diseases that can disturb sleep, but they don't lead to sort of long periods of not sleeping. They just make it feel less good.
Okay, so they might sleep their 8 hours, so whatever number of hours they need, but still
They don't feel it
they
as
won't
good.
feel as good.
Like
after
Monty
it.
was indicating, they don't get enough REM or they don't get enough deep sleep. Yeah.
Okay, it's really interesting. So, Monty, let's just go deeper into what Richard said about anxiety and depression. How does this impact people? Because there is an increasing number of people experiencing anxiety and depression and having difficulty sleeping. Which comes first, chicken or an egg?
Yeah, it is. It is a difficult one. But if you take insomnia, which is a difficulty falling asleep or falling back asleep when you wake up at night, the development of insomnia is what we call a 3P model. So the first P stands for a predisposed individual. Unfortunately, women have higher chance of developing insomnia. And people with anxious tendencies, people who tend to get stressed easily, or people who maintain perfectionist tendencies have higher chances of developing insomnia. So they're predisposed. And those individuals, when they have a precipitating factor, they are in a state of hypervigilance or hyperalertness. That could be from getting injured while playing a sport, or getting a new diagnosis, or getting the tooth out, or preparing for their leaving cert exams. All of these are high stress situations which can bring that hypervigilance or the hyperalertness, and they start to sleep poorly. And that's for a few nights. But then, the exams may finish, they may recover from their injury, or the diagnosis is well managed, but the poor sleep continues, and that's when you have to look at that. That's when they develop thoughts like, will I sleep tonight? What if I don't? How will I manage my day tomorrow? So those are the anxious thoughts associated with sleep, and they act as the perpetuating factors. So those anxious thoughts brings the hypervigilance or the hyperalertness that I mentioned earlier. So where are they coming from? They're coming from the unhelpful beliefs, or the dysfunctional beliefs that we develop once we start to sleep poorly. So stress and anxiety, starts with dysfunctional beliefs at the top, and then that results in the anxiety, which results in the hyperalertness and results in poor sleep, and then that cycle is perpetuated on a nightly basis, sometimes for weeks, months, or years. Yeah.
So the thought of sleep, and I remember working with people with depression, and the thought of sleep, of going to bed already created the anxiety in them.
Yes.
Yeah, so Maria, you're a health psychologist, so tell us a little bit more about that state of panic before going to bed.
Absolutely. It's very, like, building on what Molly said, your beliefs and how your thinking processes around sleep play such a big role, because really what you're trying to do before you go to sleep is achieve a state of rest and bring your body down to that state of rest. But if you're worried and you're thinking about all of these thoughts, then that's counterproductive, because you're anxious, then you're in a state of stress and your body's not able to relax. So it's really difficult, really, and especially when we're lying in bed and we're thinking about, I need to go to sleep, it's really important, I'm not going to be able to work properly tomorrow, it's going to compromise my functioning, then it's a spiral, and it can just kind of keep getting worse. And that's something, even for people who don't have insomnia, everyone has experienced those nights where you're lying in bed and you're thinking, oh, it's 12 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock, I need to get to sleep. And especially, like, lots of people have, it's very natural, I suppose, to start thinking about things in bed. You have those kind of racing thoughts or busy brains. And I find for myself, especially if I work late at night, I'm thinking about the things I'm working on, and it's hard to kind of shut down those beliefs. I think sometimes it's helpful to kind of reframe it, so the aim isn't necessarily to get to sleep. The aim is to rest. And if we reframe it like that in our minds, it can be helpful. I know one of my kids especially, she's very, busy thinker, and she would be ruminating a lot at night. And I've had to really consciously try to stop myself from saying, even have a good night, sleep well, go to sleep now. So taking that back step and saying, have a good rest, it's time to rest now, so that the focus isn't so much on sleep. And I think once we're taking that pressure off ourselves, that can go a long way. So it's helpful as well to maybe say, don't worry about getting to sleep. It's not about getting to sleep. It's about just achieving that rest in our bodies. And there's lots of strategies that we can use to try and quieten our minds down. And
we must have had that. You must have had that conversation lots with people
Absolutely,
in
yeah,
your
yeah. I think it's about finding that combination of physical sleepiness and mental relaxation. Once we can get that, we will be okay then.
Yeah.
But it is that anxious thoughts, the ruminating thoughts about how am I going to manage my day tomorrow. And there's a lot of news about health-related consequences of sleep deprivation or poor sleep that actually worries people quite a lot, and especially the story of Margaret Thatcher, and which is quite commonly talked about, right?
Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, the sleep deprivation can result in these A, B, C, and D, the health issues, without mentioning the like dementia, Alzheimer's, and that does worry people quite a lot, and does have the potential to keep people awake at night. So I think it's very important that how we package that information when we present it to people.
Yeah, I feel quite strongly about that because I see a lot of people in the clinic, so they come and see a doctor about something that's very normal physiologically, and I'm surprised at how much tension it's caused, and I'm sure you do the same, and in the end, it is a physiological process, but we even started this conversation by saying how dangerous it is not to get sleep. If you just left everything to its own accord, everybody falls asleep because you can't avoid it. So the issue is really finding, like you said, the sort of putting the worry aside and allowing sleep's natural process to take place. Because if you said to the individual, and sometimes I even say this to people, right, well, stay awake all night, see what happens, and you can't. You might be an hour or two later. And in a lifetime, an hour or two's less sleep on one particular night doesn't have much consequence the next day. You might be a bit irritable, might be a bit low. But, I think if you're managing world tariffs the next day, that's a big problem. But like most of us don't have such a responsible job, that you're just dealing with the day, you're going to be okay. And sort of letting it go, knowing that sleep will come, is okay. Maybe not getting into bed and having a fight with yourself is just is the battleground that you just sort of give up on. You say, well, go to bed when I'm tired. And yes, those stories about missed sleep for weeks and months and years might lead to long-term consequences. That's a disastrous scenario that some people put themselves into. And we're all aware that our resources are much lower at night. You just don't have the resolve, you don't have the mental energy, the physical energy, so you're always going to let disasters take over. Whereas you wake up in the morning, even if you've had a bad night's sleep, you're more resourceful. And so I think, I don't know about you, but our biggest tip, and I never thought this would be the case, but about 15 years ago it came into the management of bad sleep that you paradoxically treat it by sleep restriction. Doing less sleep, you're so darn tired that you'll fall asleep. Such a simple concept. I mean, I have to say, when I first heard about it, I thought, this is never going to work. Yeah.
It's really interesting, and that reminds me, when my baby was very young, I was sleep deprived, and many of us are. And I remember, I'm an early riser, but I wanted to sleep for as long as possible. And there were times when I slept until 10 o'clock and I still wanted to sleep. I was no longer an early riser. So it all also happens for people at different times of their life. They might have issues with sleep, whereas in other times they don't. So let's talk about the life stages. What life stages impact our sleep?
Well, actually, I mean, you raised a good one about having children. I speak not as an expert of with an N of two, because I have two children. That a long time ago, that I never had experience of insomnia when I had small children, because you're so darn tired, like you said. And I think that's something that people should bear in mind. We never see people with insomnia who just have small babies because they're so darn tired. But I think there are greater experts about how you manage small children. But in the life course, there's loads of them. Adolescence is an area where I think it really picks up. That there's a very interesting transition from childhood into sort of into sort of later adolescence, early adulthood, where people tend to let their chronotrope go quite late. So we're all familiar with that experience of the late adolescent or the university student who's up till 2, 3 in the morning. And it's just a natural drift that happens. And then in their early 20s, the first feature of middle age takes over and they start to go back to the more normal, whatever chronotype they have. And that's a normal variation. After that, we're in a pattern from mid-20s until our 80s, where we do the same amount of sleep at the time that suits us, assuming our job allows us. Later, sleep tends to shorten a bit, but everybody sleeps, even in older age. But that's the normal. I mean, I'm sure you guys have.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we do come across teenagers who have difficulty falling asleep, developing that delayed sleep phase. And that needs to be treated with strategic light exposure in the morning hours and all of that. But like Prof. Costello said, as we advance in age, there is also a reduction in the non-REM deep sleep in our mid-40s. But it's unfortunate because that is the time when we have children and to look after them, and also people trying to get ahead in their career and focusing on career growth and all of that. Our chronotype also seems to change as we advance in age, whereas when we are younger, if we are more evening type, as we get older, we tend to become more morning type, and hence the early bird menu in the restaurants. But I think that is something else to look out for. And there is also this notion that older people don't need much sleep. But I think they do need more sleep, or normal amount of sleep at that stage, because there's more repair process happening in our body as we advance in age.
Okay, so that's really interesting, because I've always believed that as you grow older, you need less sleep. There is a myth like this out there. Yeah. So we still need to maintain the amount of sleep that we have, but maybe the challenges we've experienced in our midlife have to some extent impacted on it. So, for example, menopause, right? Menopause would possibly have impact on our quality of sleep.
It can, absolutely. So lots of people experience sleep disruption during the perimenopause. So for some women, they can have trouble getting to sleep. Some women experience trouble staying asleep, so they might wake up a lot during the night, or wake up really early in the morning. And I suppose a lot of the symptoms associated with the menopause can disrupt sleep. So if you're experiencing things like hot flushes or night sweats, that is going to be disruptive. So it's really important to kind of try and address those, and to speak to your doctor about managing those symptoms. Because if they're disrupting your sleep, then they have a bigger impact on your health as well. And I mean, there's strategies that you can do, like, even having cold water beside your bed and a washcloth to try and manage those symptoms. But certainly it would be really important to speak to a healthcare professional in relation to those. Yeah.
Perfect. So that's for women. Is there an equivalent of menopause for men
really
that
is,
would impact their sleep? Tell me a little bit about
Yeah,
this.
I mean, there is, in the sense that, there's a recognised menopause in men. It's not as dramatic or as impactful as it is for women, but I'm not certain that it necessarily could be tied down. I think what Monty said around the 3 Ps principle for insomnia is really important. It just so happens that they come together a little bit more around that midlife period, in the that kind of precipitating factor is just a little bit more likely, isn't it, Molly?
Yeah, certainly, yeah. And also, our emotional reactivity can be different through different age group. So that is something to watch out for, that not to become a precipitating factor.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of sleep. We've talked about the need for us to maybe give ourselves a break sometimes when we don't get enough sleep. We talked about some of the factors that impact our sleep. Some of them are happen once off maybe throughout our lifespan. Others are maybe over a longer period of time. So let's talk about some of the tools now that we can use to help us with sleep. Can I ask you about one tool that so many people talk about? Naps. Should we have naps? I remember reading about Churchill, how he was holding his keys, and he would have this short nap. As soon as the nap was over, the keys would drop and he'd wake up. Should we have those naps, or will they actually prevent us from having a good night's sleep a few hours later?
I think that if you wanted to have a fist fight amongst specialists, that would probably be the question, because I'm not certain there's a definitive answer to this. May well be that, at least that's my view on it, that they suit some people and they don't others, and you got to listen to your own body. But Madi,
no, I would completely agree with that. none of us would have to nap, but some people may have long commutes and some people might have small children at home, which kind of reduces their sleep opportunity, or elderly parents to be looked after. So you're not getting enough sleep at night, and then you may have to resort to a short nap. But I think what's more important is to actually follow some nap rules. Keep it as short as you can, maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It's a sleep snack, right? It's like taking a snack. So try not to have it closer to your main sleep episode, which is your nighttime sleep. So finish your nap before 4 p.m. And if you're not feeling sleepy at your regular bedtime, maybe just wait for another 10 or 15 minutes because you used up some of that appetite for sleep that you were building up during the day. Yeah.
Okay, so it's more a strategy for a sleep debt than it is
Exactly.
for actually a regular
Absolutely.
active or
And if you're
routine
finding
within
you're
your
doing
life.
it, just like Molly said, you haven't had enough sleep at night.
Okay. What about devices? I remember we did a study at our centre where we asked people to leave their phones behind an hour before sleep. And what we found was that their sleep quality, so this is their self-reported sleep quality, was higher as a result, not to mention many other improvements like in well-being, connection with their partners. What do you think of the devices?
Well, I think it's what's on the devices and the light. So both are important. But it's as much, I mean, you were saying how important it was that you sort of, set yourself up for rest. And I'm not sure the phone, unless you're communicating with somebody, special and close to you, there's not really a reason to be using the phone for, it's just a vehicle of stress. And
Well, how about listening to music or listening to a book before going to bed that gets you into sleep? Or how about, there are so many sleep apps at the moment, maybe some, I don't know, hypnosis or something. Would you recommend them?
Yeah. I think the important thing with devices is around the light. So we know that light exposure impacts on our circadian rhythm, and if we have a lot of blue light exposure at night, that's the signal to our bodies to wake up. So it's going to disrupt our sleep. So I do think it's really important to try and put the devices away at night, at least maybe an hour before bed. But I do think there are lots of apps available that support our sleep. So, for example, meditation or mindfulness apps, some people find those great for just, especially if you have those busy thoughts at night and you're feeling anxious, they really can help to kind of bring you to the present moment, relax and quieten your mind, so you're not thinking about what's happened or what's maybe going to happen in the future, and they bring you to the present. And that can be enough to just engage us enough so that we're not distracted by our anxieties, and relax us enough so that we're able to fall asleep. And things like audiobooks as well can work. I know, mindfulness, I guess, isn't for everyone. It really appeals to some people and it works great for some people, but it's not for everyone. So sometimes having a distraction can also work really well for going to sleep. I know I use one that my colleague, Dr. Lisa Mellon, who's a lifestyle medicine practitioner as well, she recommended this app to me where someone narrates a classic work of fiction to you in a really quiet, kind of calm voice, and I've been listening to the same book since November because I just fall asleep so quickly that I finished it yesterday, 29 chapters over the course of about 6 months, and I find that really effective because it's enough to just stop me from thinking about the things that are keeping me awake, but it's not so engaging that I'm glued to it and I'm staying awake trying to listen to it. So
Absolutely.
I find that great.
And actually what I'm thinking of is, we read books to children before going to bed. So why not listen to somebody reading books to us when we're trying to go to sleep? Very good tip. Thank you so much. So any other tips for falling asleep or staying asleep?
Well, I think I'll go back to if you go to bed when you're really tired, if you delay sleep. You were saying this, Matty. I mean, if you don't, if you find yourself getting into bed and you're not really ready for sleep, and you start to find yourself paradoxically waking, it's a good idea to get out of bed.
Okay.
So, and if that means you delay by half an hour. I think in that time, you shouldn't be putting yourself into work mode or stress mode. You should be doing something kind of dull and repetitive and relatively uninteresting. I mean, you could read a physical book or listen to an audiobook or whatever, but you definitely, my top tip is not to be in bed sort of fretting, tossing and turning. You know, you're either in bed to sleep or you're out of bed.
Perfect. So, because otherwise, all of this tossing and turning would lead to frustration.
It does lead to frustration, and as I was sort of, you know, I've often experienced myself, my resolve is much lower. So you say to yourself, oh, I'll be good, and I'll, you know, I'll not let this happen, or I'll do mindfulness. But it just sort of takes a hold. So out of the bed, it suddenly changes. It's amazing the difference between being on your back trying to fall asleep and just being up and out.
Interesting.
And it keeps the bed-sleep association strong when you're not spending a long time awake in bed. And your first opportunity to fall asleep is in the first 20 to 30 minutes. So once you exhaust that, there isn't one, unless you get up, leave for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and come back and start again. That is definitely useful.
So what else could we do with our room, physically, with our environment to help us go to sleep?
I should feel obliged as a medic to say is that alcohol is a really bad idea. It becomes a stimulant. You know, people might think of it as a quick fix for sleep, but it paradoxically wakens you. It's as bad as caffeine.
Okay. So it wakes you up. It
puts the brain into an active mode.
Okay.
So that, and in fact, sleeping tablets pretty much in that place as well.
Okay.
A really bad idea for sleep.
Okay, sleeping tablets are a bad idea. That's really interesting. One of my best friends is a GP, and she said the number of people who don't want to listen to some of the tips that you're just giving. Instead, all they want is a quick fix of a sleeping tablet. So you don't think it's a good idea?
Look, everybody might once in a while need a sleeping tablet in a moment of extraordinary grief or overwhelming stress, you know, to break a little cycle of sleeplessness. They're absolutely great, and every GP is familiar with that circumstance. Somebody's recently had a bereavement, or there's some huge stress in their lives, and somebody just wants a mental and physical break for a few days. But the biggest challenge you could say to the individual, you know, if you're looking for a sleeping tablet and you can't sleep, is this tablet really working? You know? And so people just get associated, a bit like what you said about the lavender. They get fixed on the idea that they don't have a sleeping tablet, they won't work, and it's the equivalent of having a couple of glasses of alcohol before going to sleep. It's not a good idea, and it, you know, now you've two problems. You've become addicted to a sleeping pill, and you're still not sleeping terribly well. So it's better off, like the wise Kerryman said, you know, I wouldn't start here. It's best off not starting with sleeping tablets. Yeah, absolutely.
So the topic of today's episode is the lifespan sleep. Are there any other tips that you would give people, depending on what lifestyle what lifespan stage they're at?
For middle of the night awakening and difficulty returning to sleep when you wake up at night, it almost becomes a meeting time with themselves. You know, you're awake for 20 or 30 minutes and you're anxious about getting back to sleep, but you're also getting other thoughts about work, family, and what you have to do the next day. So when you do that consistently for a number of nights, it becomes a meeting time with yourself. So we found it useful to have journaling time early in the evening to condition the brain to think that meeting is not at 2:30 in the morning, but instead now it is moved to 5:30 in the evening. So to sit down in a quiet space with pen and paper and divide the journaling into 3 sections: gratitude, journaling as the first part, then make a to-do list, and also rationalize your anxieties as a third part. So kind of, moving that meeting to an earlier time. And then we kind of also putting our day to bed before we go to bed at night, so we don't bring those thoughts to bed with us. So that has been found useful.
Thank you, Marty. So what are your take-home messages for our audience today?
I suppose I'd have 3. I mean, I've listened to some great comments. I've learned loads from what you've said. Mine would be that it's okay to know that missing a little bit of sleep here and there is quite okay. You should think of restfulness and sleep as 2 issues. And There are really long-term consequences of bad sleep for the body, but they're not something that that's going to happen overnight. If you've been on a 20-year shift, if you know, and you've a really disturbed sleep, or you've a physical condition that gives you, bad sleep for many years. But for most people, it's just an instant. It's a speed bump in life, and the first thing to know about speed bumps is that you just go over them and you move on.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
Marty.
I found it very useful to listen to both of you as well. I think we can summarize with optimal sleep-related habits, and the consistent wake time is more important, and a reasonably consistent bedtime based on how sleepy you feel closer to your bedtime. And also functional beliefs about sleep, that sleep is a natural process and it happens by itself. We don't need to force it, we don't need to make it happen. We'll be okay the next day, like Professor said. And also relaxation practices, to engage in a relaxation practice in the last couple of hours before you go to bed at night.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Maria.
Building on this point exactly, I would say the biggest take home is to just trust your body. It's programmed to sleep. You will sleep. It's a totally natural process, but you can set it up for success. So there's lots of things that you can do to optimize the sleep environment and to kind of help support your circadian rhythms. And doing that, thinking about, things like your light exposure, when you're getting physical activity, when you're eating, all of those things can help to optimize the conditions for getting good sleep. And thinking about those, I think, is one of the best things you can do to impact on your health.
Thank you, Maria. This concludes our discussion today. My deepest gratitude to Richard, Motti and Maria for sharing with us their knowledge about sleep. I hope you have learned a lot in today's episode. Further details about the upcoming RCSI MyHealth series episodes can be found on the RCSI website, and you can also find the RCSI MyHealth series episodes across all major podcast platforms. RCSI is committed to improving human health and well-being, and we are very proud to be ranked number 5 in the world for our impact on the good health and well-being. From all of us at RCSI University of Medicine and Health Sciences, thank you for joining us today.